Okay, aloha! Thank you for joining the Choose to Challenge IDEATHON, a project-based competition for students to come up with workable solutions to address gender issues in work and school places. My name is Diana Gremillion, and I'm a motivational speaker and the founder of Successful Life Strategies and a gender advocate. Today we have an orientation portion of the Choose to Challenge IDEATHON. We'll be sharing with you the schedule and the mechanics of the competition and provide an overview of gender issues and why we should address them. This event is organized by the Philippine Consulate General in Honolulu, the Filipino Junior Chamber, the Chaminade University Communications Department, with the support of the Philcom Center, East-West Marketing, and our community leaders, including Vanessa Kopp of CBI Hawaii, Ned Directo of the Bank of Hawaii, and Grace Go. Thank you very much to our sponsors and to our organizers. To welcome us to this event today, we'd like to call Vice Consul Andrea Christina Caymo of the Philippine Consulate General in Honolulu. Vice Consul Andrea is a career diplomat who previously worked in the Office of Strategic Planning and Policy Coordination, Department of Foreign Affairs. Prior to entering the diplomatic service, she worked in various industries such as banking, travel, research, and nonprofit. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Andrea.
Thank you so much, Diana, for that warm introduction. And welcome to our Choose to Challenge IDEATHON. So, achieving gender equality, equal access to opportunities, and protection of rights and welfare of women and girls are issues that the Philippine Consulate General in Honolulu are passionate about. Despite the fact that women comprise half of the world's population, only a fraction of world leaders and CEOs are women. There are still parts of the world where women cannot vote, own property, and make decisions for themselves. Men and women are still treated differently and paid unequally. Women are more likely to suffer from a lot of inequality and gender-based violence than men. Access to education, healthcare, and other social services often do not take into consideration the unique situation of women brought about by persisting stereotypes. We do need to address these gender issues as women and members of LGBTQ deserve to have the same rights and privileges as men. If women are given the same access to opportunities, the world will be a better place, as so we are taking into consideration both the perspective of men and women when it comes to conducting policies, projects, and activities. Now, the issue of gender equality is a global issue. It is enshrined in the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. While solving gender inequality may seem gender inequality may seem like a broad objective that requires multiple actors and big players, there are things we can do within our schools and communities that can help us in getting closer to our goal of achieving gender equality. This is the reason why the Philippine Consulate General in Honolulu, together with our partners, the Filipino Junior Chamber, the Chaminade University Communication Departments, and our sponsors organized this IDEATHON. We want to hear the ideas on how we can work together to address some of the issues that are closest to our hearts. We hope that the IDEATHON will challenge you to come up with workable solutions in your school and workplace in addressing the challenges faced by women and our members of the LGBTQ community. We wish you well, and we look forward to hearing your project proposal during the demo day on this March 31.
Woo! Let's give it up for Andrea. Thank you for that opening. Can I hear you guys unmute? Let's give Andrea some love. Woo! amazing. Thank you so much, Vice Consul Andrea, for setting the tone for our Choose to Challenge Ideathon. Before we go to the discussion of the mechanics of the Ideathon, we want to share a series of videos for you to understand more what are some of the gender issues that women are encountering in their homes, their schools, their workplaces, and in our society in general. Our first video will provide an overview on gender stereotypes and how it leads to gender inequality and potentially gender-based violence.
This video is a closer look at the gender inequality that fuels the violence that affects 2 out of 3 women from all backgrounds in the Pacific. So what does cause domestic violence? Let's rewind and see when gender inequality takes hold. Mele and Jacob are the same age. They grew up in the same village. Growing up, they learned different roles for men and women. Mele helped her mum with cooking, cleaning, and childcare, while Jacob helped with outdoor work. He has more free time. Their rigid views of masculine as strong and protective and feminine as caring and serving were formed. Jacob learns that anything feminine is associated with weakness. He is teased if he shows emotion and told he kicks like a girl if he plays poorly. Jacob learns that women are valued less, boys are better than girls. Mele learns that she can't do everything the boys are allowed to do. As Mele grows into a teen, men start commenting on her body. She is told to cover herself, don't walk alone or after dark. She is made responsible for preventing men's behavior. Meanwhile, Jacob sees his friends harassing women. It makes them seem powerful. He does it too, so his friends will respect him. The two start a relationship and both begin looking for work after high school. Mele struggles to find work. She accepts a low-paid office job. Jacob finds a higher-paying job more easily and becomes the breadwinner. Mele is dependent on Jacob for financial support. Mele does all the household chores and cares for her grandparents and their growing family. Jacob gets angry if the dishes aren't done or his clothes aren't clean. He expects dinner to be ready when he gets home. He makes major decisions for both of them. After all, he earns the most. When he starts to hit Mele, he blames her for it. He says she provokes him, that she needs to try harder. That it's her role as a partner to serve him. They are not equals. Mele turns to her pastor for help. He asks her to consider her own role. He reminds her that we cannot change others, but we can work to improve ourselves and be patient. In this way, church teachings can be interpreted to justify gender inequality and maintain the status quo, leaving Mele without help and Jacob in control. The police visit the house. They discourage Mele from pressing charges, downplay her experiences, and encourage reconciliation. Gender inequality can be reinforced even by people who are there to help, leaving Jacob unchallenged. Mele's safety is considered less important than maintaining harmony. Gender inequality is the result of the belief that men and women have different rights and entitlements. It means that men's opinions and desires are more important than those of women. It is created and maintained through social norms, socialization of children, and institutional and structural barriers, as we've seen with Mele and Jacob. This inequality is the cause of domestic violence. Inequality between men and women and parents and children gives some people power over others, which can lead to abuse. It is embedded in the belief that women's purpose is to serve and obey, and men's role is to lead. When domestic violence is recognized as a result of gender inequality, it becomes clear that a lot of excuses for violence are just that, excuses. Domestic violence is not caused by alcohol, poor tempers, disobedient women, uncompleted household tasks, or any other excuse. It is caused because of the belief that men are entitled to have their desires met and to be obeyed, and this is power, this is gender inequality. Gender inequality is deeply rooted in our society and the source of domestic violence. But domestic violence also reinforces gender inequality. It is a vicious cycle. Family, school, and church can address gender norms and attitudes in children before they become ingrained. Media affects how people view each other. Working towards representation of equal relationships between genders can help change people's minds. Gender inequality programs, such as improving support and response services, must include men and women. To summarize, gender inequality causes domestic violence. Domestic violence is fueled by inequality, power, and control. Domestic violence is often blamed on excuses. Gender inequality and domestic violence are a cycle. Domestic violence is a violation of human rights. We can stop the cycle of violence by working together to transform harmful social norms. In an equal society, everyone thrives.
What a powerful video on gender stereotypes and gender-based violence. This next video is more about gender bias. From the time that we're born, society assigned certain expectations of what a girl and what a boy can do, what they can wear, act, how they can feel, how they can speak, and more. And as the video mentioned, this leads to inequality and oftentimes abuse. In this next video, we want to see how well your minds have been conditioned by some of these gender expectations. And we invite you to solve the riddle, which we'll be showing you next. So go ahead. Can you solve the riddle?
As part of an experiment to explore the human mind, we asked 22 people to solve the same riddle and recorded their responses. Feel free to participate also. Are you ready?
The riddle. A father is about to bring his son to a job interview, applying for a position at a large stockbrokers company in the city. Just as they arrive at the company's parking lot, the son's phone rings. He looks at his father, who says, "Go ahead, answer it." The caller is the trading company CEO, who says, "Good luck, son, you've got this." The son ends the call and once again looks at his father, who is still next to him in their car. How is this possible?
He gets a call from the CEO, but it says,
"Good luck, son."
But he was next to him.
So it's not the father.
I think it was probably an audio recording of his father.
Maybe he made a demo tape.
Like he has two fathers?
This is a hard one.
Maybe it's a word joke, like it's the grandfather of the son.
No, I think his name is Son.
I don't know.
Maybe it's just like an old man, you know, calling a younger guy son.
I have no idea.
The answer. It's his mother.
Oh, that's so stupid. Yes, of course.
I should have thought of that, yes.
The CEO is a woman.
so I'm biased. In a sense. Is this about diversity and inclusion?
It's really mind-blowing, actually.
I always thought that I'm not very sexist. But in spite of that, I think these subconscious biases are there in everyone's mind.
How much bias I still have in terms of thinking that the CEO needs to be a man.
Yeah, I definitely was picturing a man.
They identify with males more than females these days.
Why can't women also be CEOs or doctors or, right?
When I think about a CEO or someone that's high positioned within a company, I mostly think of men.
And it's a shame, I think.
And it's so weird because I'm a CEO and I'm a woman.
And I want to be a CEO. Why didn't I think about that? Crap.
I believe women can absolutely be CEOs.
And that's definitely something that we should work on, especially when you're saying that so many people have been told this riddle and most people haven't gotten it.
Women make great CEOs and great leaders as well. And yet only 5% of Fortune 500 CEOs are women. Let's change our mindset.
Another really great video. So tell me, did you solve the riddle, or are you one of the many who are unconsciously harboring gender bias? And this was just one example of the many ways that we unconsciously harbor it. So this video that we just played showed that addressing gender issues really starts first from within. Another issue that we need to look into is the multiple roles of women and how these roles are sometimes overlooked and underpaid in society.
Unpaid care work is the kind of work that people do in taking care of each other and building up each other's capabilities. In particular, very young children, people who are sick, need a pretty significant amount of attention and care. And very often it is women who do this kind of work. The main characteristic of unpaid work is that it's not directly paid or remunerated. Now, in theory, this kind of work should be counted as part of GDP. For example, if you take a country like Argentina, the calculations that were done by feminist economists and statisticians give us a figure of about 7% of GDP. And in a much less developed country like Tanzania, it was even seen to be a much higher figure, like 63%. One study included also a case study of Switzerland. What was found out was if you added the unpaid care work that is done in Switzerland and you value it, it's almost as big as the banking and insurance industry in Switzerland. But to really value this work, I think what is really important is to appreciate its significance for any society or economy. So this work is really what makes, the society and the economy tick. In many ways, this kind of work can be seen as the solid foundation on which official industries and services and economies and schools and universities sit. Without this kind of work, it would be very difficult to even think of a society that can function. One kind of universal fact seems to be that in nearly all human societies, it is often upon women this kind of work falls. What we say, it's highly feminized. We have some data which showed that something like 75% of all unpaid care work is carried out by women and girls. So this is a very unequal distribution between men and women. In fact, it does penalize women because taking on the bulk of this work often carries a penalty in terms of not being able to have a full-time job with a decent wage, not being able to accumulate a pension, not getting all of the benefits that come from formal sector employment. So the penalties are many, even though the benefits to society are huge. Redistributing care is really critical. So that really involves a rethinking and redoing of our kind of social relationships. States can go a long way in terms of making sure that there are good quality public services, childcare services, but also you try and change your expectations and social norms so that women and men can share those responsibilities more equally. So with more policies, you also increase the social expectation that more can be done to redistribute the work and not to just say this is a private matter and it's for families to deal with, which very often falls on women and girls.
I'm curious, how many of you have maybe seen that the women in your family or the women that you know take on some of the less paid roles, and some of the males are the ones who take on the more highly paid ones? Can I get a show of hands? Who here has seen that before? And you can raise your hand in the chat and the other things as well. Okay, yeah, I see several of you, Janella, Sean, Scott, yeah, Christina, Stacy, Kayla, Hannah, Mariah, I saw you raise your hand. Yeah, Hannah, I see you. Yeah, we've seen this. Is anyone willing to share some of their experience with this? Anyone want to share some insight or what they've experienced? No? Okay, that's fine. I gotta ask, right? Okay. So yeah, this is something that we see in society, and it's something that we also, I'm seeing, really want to change. So let's get a hands. I want to see, is this something that we want to change? Give me a hands up if this is something that we think should change. Okay, and that's what we're here to do today, right? Amber, Christina, Carolyn, yeah, Ava, Kayla, Stacy, I see you, Elaine, yes, amazing. Amber, Hannah, Janella, Sean, Scott, I see you. This is something we're here to change. So let's look at some other ideas, because with the pandemic, women have been disproportionately affected and took a lot of the burden from having multiple roles in their homes, their careers, and in society. And this is why it's so important that whenever we come up with policies and programs, we do need to take into consideration that multiple roles that women play and ensure that we alleviate some of the burden that they carry by designing our policies and programs with women's situations in mind. And we hope that you enjoyed these short video clips. After this orientation, we'll be sending everyone a link to more resources which you can look into to enhance your understanding and appreciation of the various issues that women face. At this point, I would like to call on Patrick Comiso, President of the Filipino Junior Chamber of Commerce, to discuss the mechanics and schedule of the IDEATHON. Patrick currently works for the Hawaii State House of Representatives as a legislative analyst and conducts research and bill drafting for state representatives. Patrick, please take it away.
Thank you, Diana, for leading that enlightening discussion on gender issues. And we all hope that the short presentation we just had helped you in narrowing the gender issues that you wish to address with your group. So I wanted to give an overview of the Choose the Challenge Ideathon that we're having. The event will run from March 11 today to March 31st with 2 intake orientation scheduled on March 11th and then later on March 18th. Later this afternoon, you will have a chance to meet with your teammates during the breakout session and your assigned mentor. You are encouraged to meet with your group mates online or in person, depending on your members' availability. Your team is expected to submit your initial draft of what you want to present on March 24th. And then on March 31st, you will be presenting your final proposal for judging. You will be given 5 minutes to present, and another 5 minutes will be allotted afterwards for question and answer. The best proposal wins the $1,000 prize. To help guide your group discussion, we would like to suggest this template that you're seeing right now. This template will also be sent to your registered email address after this orientation. Vice Consul Andrea will discuss more about the expected content of your project proposal.
Thank you for sharing that, Patrick. So just we wanted to provide you some guidance on what you should be preparing for your project proposal. Later on, we will be grouping you, and you'll have a chance to meet with your teammates and discuss what are the possible gender issues that you would like to zero in and your proposed solution to this specific gender issue. And during the judging, these are what we are looking for. We wanted the solutions to be gender neutral. This means that the project will not reinforce existing gender inequalities. We want the proposal to be gender sensitive and responsive. It must attempt to redress existing gender inequalities. We also want the solutions to be gender positive or transformative and attempt to redefine women and men's gender roles and relations. What are some of the gender-related issues that we could look into? First, there is gender bias, or the deliberate or unconscious bias, which makes it harder for women and LGBTQ to get hired and promoted, and this negatively impacts their day-to-day work experience. Some of the manifestation of gender bias is in terms of having gender pay gap between men and women, with there's also the lack of access to education of women because society prefers to educate men. There's the increased proportion of we wanted men to have increased share in care related activity. There's also bias in terms of participation in the formal care economy and in access to paid work. There's also the issue on gender stereotype, gender segregation in the labor market, and the lack of entrepreneurs, women entrepreneurs. These are just some of the issues under gender bias. Another issue that we can look at is gender discrimination. Gender discrimination is the gender-based distinction, exclusion, or restriction compounded by or intersecting with other grounds, status, or conditions such as ethnicity, age, poverty, or religion. So discrimination is when you are you are limiting access to opportunities to a certain gender. For example, you only want to hire men in your company, or you only want to hire, or you only want to tap men in your sports, in your team. So these are some of the ways which we could see gender discrimination happening. So there's like in terms of access to opportunities, we are this society is discriminating between men and women, and that has to end. Another gender related issue is the multiple roles of women. Women are often overburdened with multiple roles, their reproduction roles, such as those related to household work and childcare, production. Not only are they expected to take care of their kids, their loved ones, they're also expected to work and add on to the livelihood of their family. There's also the social cultural roles that they play, which are often unpaid and unrecognized. A lot of the women, they're expected to they contribute to a lot of communal work, either in their extended family or in their respective organizations like churches, nonprofit organization. So a lot of women does multiple roles, not only in their houses, but also in their companies and also in society as a whole. So what are the things that we can look into to help lessen the burden of multiple roles of women and enhance their work-life balance? So this is something that your group could consider. Like, how could we support flexible working arrangement and increase the quality of childcare services and facilities for the dependents of women and their parents and carers? There's also the issue of gender-based violence, as we saw in the video. Inequality fostered gender-based violence. Gender-based violence is the harmful acts directed at an individual based on their gender. It is rooted in gender inequality, the abuse of power, and harmful norms. So what we wanted is to support the prevention of and protect women from experiencing gender-based violence, and at the same time support men and boys' role in eradicating violence against women. These are some of the tools that you can look into while you are discussing your project proposal. You could look into the concept of gender mainstreaming, gender statistic, gender analysis, gender stakeholder consultations, gender budgeting, impact assessment, gender indicators, and monitoring and evaluation. We will be providing some resources on these topics to help you have a more informed project proposal, and for you to better understand the various gender issues and tools that you can apply, not only for this project, but hopefully in your future activities, events, and initiatives. So in terms of the actual submission of the project proposal, this is our suggested template. So for your section 1, we hope to see your analysis. This is where you'll identify what is the intervention area that you wanted to focus on. Do you want to solve a gender issue at school, workplace, home, etc.? We wanted you to be able to narrow down your proposal because the goal is for your proposal to be actually implementable. So the more defined the scope, the better would be your proposal and the chances of it actually getting adopted. In this section, we also hope to see your gender analysis. This means that you're able to portray the differences in women's and men's situation and needs and identify the relevant inequality. So we want you to analyze why is there a problem in this situation. Also, we wanted to see qualitative and quantitative sex disaggregated data to describe gender gaps and patterns. It's not only, we hope that you'll not only just mention that, for example, there is gender inequality in terms of women's access to sports in this particular school. So we hope that you would substantiate that with numbers. So for example, you could say that only 25% of women participate in sports in this high school. So that's how you wanted to your section 1 to look like. So there's quantitative and qualitative sex disaggregated data, and at the same time you're able to analyze why this is a problem. So why is a low participation of women in school sports a problem? So those are the things that we hope that you will put into your final presentation. For this next section, we wanted to see your objectives and indicators. What are your gender goals? What are the objectives that you want to reach for both women and men? Because gender, it's not only for women, but it's also for men. It affects both the different sexes, and it also affects all gender, even the LGBTQ community. So we wanted to be able you to be specific as to what your objectives would be. Is it to increase the number of women in leadership position in schools? Is it about reducing the incidence of bullying of women and members of LGBTQ in your community? So you have to be able to define what specific aspect, what specific gender issue you wanted to target on. We also want to see how the project intends to contribute to overarching gender goals, for you to indicate the specific gender indicators to facilitate the monitoring of gender objectives. So we want this, we also want you to be able to monitor whether you are able to track the success of your proposal. That's why the indicators is important. For section 3, activities and implementation, this is where you would put in your actual proposal and your timeline for this proposal. We also want you to explain how your proposed solution addresses project's gender equality objectives. Check also if your solution is gender neutral, gender sensitive or responsive, and gender positive or transformative. You need to also consider who are the stakeholders and who will be implementing this proposal, if ever. So if you're focusing on your school, you need to understand who can you tap to implement this, and you have to indicate that in your proposal. Finally, describe how women will be involved in the project implementation, design, and how can they benefit from this. Because ultimately, we wanted to engage women or LGBTQ if they're your target audience for this intervention in the design and the implementation of whatever you're going to be proposing. Finally, we wanted to be able to monitor and evaluate your proposal. So we need to know information on how you're going to assess whether your project proposal is effective. And at the same time, you need to be able to define any corrective measures that you can undertake if the gender equality objectives are not being delivered. So basically, these are the content that we hope to see in your presentation. You may opt to add more, but yeah, those are the basic ones that we expect you to include in your presentation.
Thank you, Andrea, for providing more clarity on how the proposal should look like. Before we move into Dr. Eva Washburn-Repollo's presentation, does anyone have any questions for Patrick or for Andrea at this moment regarding what they shared? Do you have any questions?
Question?
Sure.
Are there any limits to how we would present, for example, slideshows or videos?
So the maximum number of minutes is 5, and you could either choose to do a PowerPoint presentation, or you may opt to also use other means of presenting, like video presentation. So we leave it up to the teams to decide what is the best mode of conveying your message.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. Thank you, Janella, for your question. Does anyone else have any other questions before we find out how to make this $1,000 win, right? Who's here for the $1,000 prize, right? I heard that. I was like, man, can I join? That sounds cool. All right, so let's find out, how do we win? How do we get this? And to explain the judging criteria for your project proposals, let's welcome Dr. Eva Washburn-Repollo. She's a professor at Chaminade University. Dr. Eva teaches basic communication, intercultural communication, and media and discourse studies. She's a faculty of her school as the Faculty Senate President at Chaminade University from 2019 to 2020. Dr. Eva has written and directed cultural documentaries for Micronesian, Samoan, Hawaiian, and Filipino cultures. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Dr. Eva Washburn-Repollo.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me? Wonderful. So now that we know the timelines and the deliverables on the IDEATHON, allow me to discuss how your presentation will be graded on March 31 during the Choose to Challenge IDEATHON. So here you can see 4 categories: 20% for analysis, 30% for responsiveness, 30% for adoption, and 20% for presentation. So let me break this down. You can see here that it has to have some gender analysis to understand what that even means to begin with. You have to look at definitions, what gender inequality means, and we have provided you with a lot of those, and you will be able to read more. But this is really, how are you going to support your claims? Do you have reputable and reliable sources? These are the things that are actually happening, not fake news. You have to prove that the problem exists with data. You have to be able to say, based on what we have read and what has been studied. That doesn't mean you cannot have an opinion about this data, but you have to be very good at bringing in your facts. So if you just want to think about this, what is the logic of my facts? And are my facts reliable and reputable? They have to be, we should be able to verify your facts as well, right? So the next 30% is the quality of your solution. So it's called gender responsiveness here. Are you really responding to the problem that you are seeing? Are your solutions sound? Now, we heard a lot about overarching goals in the past few slides. That means, how is this going to really transform society? We're talking about men and women, community, you know, your town, our state, the entire country, the entire world. You're not going to go towards solving all the problems at these levels, but you are able to connect how this will create a ripple effect. We are thinking about, are you monitoring your objectives so that it does really have a responsive nature to it? It works, you know, it is something that is really brilliant in terms of achieving your goals. So if you just want to tag a simple phrase for that, you can say the quality of the solution. Is it brilliant? Does it really reach a wider audience and transform society? Then the next one is another 30%, which is huge, because this is really the likelihood of adoption, which also means, can it work? Yeah. Is it practical? Do you have the time, the money, the experts? Can it be done? It's a very simple but very difficult category. You are going to have to look at who's going to be your audience. Who are the people you will, for instance, hire to get things started? This is going to be, if you are, and it also uses digital solutions. If in your solutions you're looking at digital internet and web supported types of solutions, you have to look at the interface or the service design. You have to look at, is it friendly to people who do not know how to use computers, people who are marginalized or disadvantaged even by these levels of, you know, these types of tools. So if you want to have a very simple key phrase or word for this, it is really, can it be done? How practical is your solution? And then the last one is 20%, your presentation. You've got to convince your judges in your words, in the images of your visuals, in your story, in your ability to clearly deliver your message. How effectively are you transmitting your ideas so that they can concretely become enacted? And this is really the most beautiful part of ideas. So you are really going to now make it happen, so that someday when you grow up, you will say, I was really part of what that is, this one that's going on. I was part of the group who thought of that. And don't underestimate yourselves, guys, because you have so many good ideas. So thank you. And those are the 4 categories.
Thank you, Dr. Eva, for explaining the grading criteria to us. To our participants, are you ready to meet your team? Because we are now going to assign you to your respective breakout rooms. So turn on your cameras if you haven't. You're going to want to be able to see one another. And before we move into the breakout rooms, can we have a round of applause for today's speakers? Can I hear you unmute? I want to hear some applause for them. They did a great job. All right. Without further ado, it's time to introduce our mentors. So we have, these are going to be your mentors today. We have Trish LaChica, Policy and Advocacy Director, and works with the Hawaii Public Health Institute. We have Patrick Comiso. He's a legislative analyst and part of the Hawaii State House of Representatives. And then we also have Dr. Eva Washburn-Repollo, professor at Chaminade University. Andrea Christina Caymo, Vice Consul at the Philippine Consulate General. And then lastly, Sue Lazo, Career Counselor at Kapiolani Community College. So we have the breakout rooms being prepared right now. So do we, are we ready with that? Should we ask some questions?
Oh, they should